Assalamualaikum everyone. Welcome to the Fempreneur Women of Substance series. And today we are delighted to have Sadaf Rahman with us. Hello, Sadaf. And Sadaf is an atypical entrepreneur who took the path less traveled. She, along with her brother, founded the Code School, which imparts coding skills to children aged 6 to 13 years. And they are catering to children in 8 different countries at the moment through their online platform. Hi, Sadaf, can you hear me properly?
Absolutely. Assalamu alaikum, and
Right.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very excited to be on the show.
Same here. Sadaf, please tell us, how do you think that teaching coding to a 6-year-old can open up different possibilities and opportunities for them? How can it benefit them in their life?
Absolutely. It seems a little funny when you think about it that how can teaching a 6-year-old anything, especially something as complex as coding, actually impact their future. But we're in the digital age. We're only going forward. There's no going back. We're already in it. And so our children are growing up in a digital age, and we're only going to go deeper into that digital age as we go forward. And so it's no longer important, perhaps, for our children to, I don't know, be able to do all the skills that were needed in the last 50 years. I think this is the first generation where there is a completely unknown future ahead of us, and we can only guess what that is. But the only thing that we do know for sure is that it's going to involve tech in a very major way. And in any interactions with tech, even a language that you speak with tech is not important because those languages change and develop so fast. It's a thinking, it's a mindset. It is what is the most important skill that our kids will need in the 21st century. And it's no longer math, or it's no longer, any of those other things. It's actually computational thinking and problem solving and creativity. It's things that machines cannot do. And so, there's been a lot of awareness in the world around this. I think for over a decade, a lot of global curriculums have been updated to include coding in the early years as well. We're talking about kindergarten and grades 1 to 5. Even those years now include coding. But I do feel like perhaps there is an opportunity in Pakistan to introduce this kind of thinking or curriculum and bring this really important future skill to our children.
Hmm. Sadaf, you have been working in the non-profit skills sector for the past 17 years. And why do you think that the private sector is lagging behind in teaching the skill, given that the fee structures are so high? So why should they not be up to date when it comes to coding, when teaching coding?
That's a great question. So, any kind of change at a very large scale is really hard. And so, one of the things that we really have to know is that the schooling system is ancient. It was designed, at the time of Socrates and Plato. And even our classrooms right now, the way that they are structured are really, I would say, 19th century. And teachers like myself, I count myself as a teacher. I'm an instructor at Code School. I have been doing teaching along with my corporate career, and we're 20th century teachers, but our children are 21st century learners. And so I think somewhere in the design, which is ancient, teachers that have been born and grown up pre-internet and pre-device, and now this really rapidly changing tech space is where this lag has come. And obviously, change is really hard. So we're at this cusp, and it's an opportunity. I think with
Yes,
every
and
kind of
Sadaf,
problem, there's an opportunity.
yes, Sadaf, you're IB trained as well. And now I'm not very familiar with it all because I don't have kids who are going to school. So I'll ask you, does the IB, the schools who are providing the IB curriculum, are they teaching coding at the level that you are?
So right now it is, I would say, school specific. So the IB is a different way of approaching a curriculum that is more child friendly. It's more project based. It's less about high stakes examination at the end of the year and more about kind of involving children in learning by doing, and testing them along the way. And so it's through different kind of ways, means, and forms. So I mean, when we talk about curriculum, at the end of the day, we have to realize they're just guidelines, right? Whether you look at the Common Core in the US, whether you look at the British system, which is the one that we follow as well, or whether you look at IB, they're guidelines. So nowhere will it say or not say that this is a computational thinking concept that you need to teach, right? Or this is the game that you should introduce to children in kindergarten, or this is the computer program that they need to learn. There's certain broad outcomes that you need to achieve, and there are many different paths and how to achieve it. For us at Code School, we were drawing on our experience. So my brother and I mean, we've grown up in a family where we were very, immersed in that from a very early age. And so for example, it probably comes from maybe even my father who learned programming in the 70s, when you had to put in punch cards. Like coding was, you actually had to feed in punch cards, like you feed in paper into a fax machine. You had to feed in punch cards into a computer, and that was his college experience. For us, it was where these ancient kind of computers with floppy disks and MS DOS, and for us it was very exciting because our interaction was games. We had to figure out how to use this machine so that we could play games that we used to love doing. And this is, when there used to maybe be one TV channel, at most two TV channels, right? We're growing up in the 80s and the 90s. And so, in terms of entertainment, it was the height of excitement. Like anything to do with tech was the height of
Right.
excitement. And I feel like now there's been something lost in translation on how a device is just a very ordinary thing, and teaching coding is almost like it's so boring that I was sitting in on one of the coding classes that my son was doing, who is 8 years old. And all the kids, like one was like kind of sleeping, the other was like, oh, somebody else started crying. Like, it was just like one of those classes that no one really wanted to
Yeah.
be in. And so, we wanted to bring back that joy and fun that we knew can be taught in coding.
So how do you
And
make it fun?
so we have, I mean, coding by nature is really powerful. Like it's fun in the sense that it's very real. So it's not like you're learning something notional or abstract. It's one of the few things that whether you are 5 years old or 7 years old or 70 years old, the coding is the same. The language is the same, right? Like the outcome is still going to be the same game. So it's just a matter of kind of plugging into it and you get a real output. And we have kind of very closely worked with games. So we've kind of tied it into game design. So whatever language it is we're teaching, we make sure that there is a game that is developed within 1, 2, 3, or 4 sessions. And so as a result, the kids are really excited because
Yes.
everyone loves
They
playing
have to
games
set
at
the
that age,
achievement
right?
as well.
Yes, absolutely. I've had, and we've seen some early anecdotal success. So, for example, I had a child beg me, beg me to teach him. He was 8 years old, And he made me stay back 30 minutes after class and forced me to teach him variables. Okay, because a variable is what allows you to add a score and a time to your game. And I
Okay.
don't think I have ever been in a situation where an 8-year-old has begged me to teach him variables, right? It was just because we had linked it to creating a timer or a scorecard in your game. I mean, learning variables was a lot of fun as well. And so, that's we've seen some early anecdotal success with this, and we plan to continue.
Mhm. So, Sadaf, you're catering to other countries as well. How is your experience? Is your classroom, does your classroom consist of multi-cultural kids, or do you teach them individually? How is it like? How does it work?
That's a great question. So we looked at many different models and we field tested many different models. And by and large, I think we were looking for a segment that is not being catered to, because there's a lot of kind of tech related programs for children now abroad for sure. Very few perhaps in Pakistan, but there are some here as well. So we looked at a whole range of them, and there's certain buckets. One bucket is you just simply watch a YouTube tutorial and you learn on your own, right? And so I did feel like very young children, even in our field tests, anyone below 10 and 11, by and large on the whole, couldn't follow. It was too new. They didn't even know how to open an editor, let alone toggle between a YouTube window and the programming platform, and they kind of lost interest and wandered off. I have a child. I was experimenting on him and his friends as well, and the other model was a subscription box. So a box kind of comes to your house, and you have to. It's really fun. It's catered to children. They're very bright, colorful materials, and children read them on their own and try to follow a code on their own, follow the instructions on their own. Some kids managed, very few. Majority again, kind of, unless there was someone standing on their head kind of taking them through it, they didn't really kind of have the motivation to follow, because this is a generation where we are not competing with a captive audience. It's not like math or science, they're studying and now they have to study coding through flashcards. This is, we're competing with screens and YouTube and more Nintendos, and there's so many entertainment options at the fingertips of these kids. They're not going to wait around for a 2-day project to come into fruition and then slog it out. Very few, some children did, but a lot did not. And so that's when we kind of hacked into this small group classes where children from all over the world participate given their time zone. We keep it or cap it around 8 students, if not less. And the idea is that they build camaraderie and this peer learning. So I remember in one of our classes, these were our early classes, so we had a mix of ages that were participating as well. And there was a 7-year-old who was quite young, and it was the first class he was coding. And there was a 15-year-old who was my nephew, who was sitting in and who had been coding for quite a few months already. And the 7-year-old was told the 15-year-old that actually, there is a problem with your code, and if you just connect your timer variable, or if you connect this block to that one, it'll get fixed, right? And so, even a 7-year-old could have the confidence to step up and correct a much older child, was really kind of part of the success of the model, where there's peer learning, where they watch each other and they learn from each other and they figure out how the other one is doing other things. So that we feel has been successful and continues to be successful. So our model is to use online classes of groups of 8, facilitated by coding instructors.
Mhm. So you have an offline presence as well?
We do. So we very much had plans to to have offline centers. The vision really is that every neighborhood should have a coding class, right, for the children of that neighborhood. Right now, we're very far from it. COVID and the whole pandemic really threw a wrench in the works. And so there's some advantages and disadvantages, right? So the advantage with online was we scaled to 8 countries really fast, right? That was a huge advantage. And there's no pick and drop. So parents are also relieved. You can just kind of plug and play, and you're ready, and you can just sit in a coding class, and it's very convenient. But there is an element of catering to very young children. So 5 to 6 year olds can't do online coding classes, at least from our field tests. You need to have an in person. And there's a lot of robotics and hardware and a lot of fun things that you can do in person as well that perhaps the online platform doesn't allow you to have. So the vision definitely is to have in person, but just right now we haven't rolled that out as yet because one, we're very new and the pandemic has kind of paused that plan just for now.
Sorry, Sadaf, the voice is echoing at your end. I think, can you see if you put to mute or something? Hi. We lost Sadaf.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Hi.
I'm just
Yes,
using
yes,
my
yes.
headphones.
Yes, it's perfect now. Sadaf, I have a question that the gaming industry is rapidly developing in Pakistan. So, do you think that teaching coding at such a young age could help that and, affect the progress or speed it up in that sense? Like, could this contribute to the overall development of the gaming industry?
That's a good question. So, coding is no longer for tech companies. Coding is no longer for programmers. Programming is so important that every industry will need it. Even if you are an artist, even if you are an artist, you're going to need to know coding going forward. If you are going to study economics, literature, art, anything, you can't escape tech and you cannot escape not knowing computer literacy. And computational thinking can only help. So I think that's one big thing. The second big thing is that the computational thinking is irrelevant of programming language or knowing programming. Computational thinking is knowing how to solve a problem in an organized manner. Or the concept of abstraction, where if you have a complex problem, you break it down. Or if you have something that's repetitive, you use it in a way or you design it in a way that the repetition it isn't quite needed, right? So first of all, it's a mindset. We're not talking about coding or programmers or developers. That's a different conversation altogether. Whenever you talk about a mindset, it's really important to start young and inculcate that mindset right from the very beginning. It's much harder to get that kind of mindset or bring about a mindset change in the later years. So I would 100% say that yes, an early intervention is definitely required. The second reason I think an early intervention is really required is because, the rest of the world perhaps is a decade ahead of us. And so a lot of children entering colleges are going to be expected to already have been exposed to this area of coding or computational thinking. It's just an assumption now. Like, it's almost like it's strange if you haven't done it. And there is kind of this creeping kind of mindset in global universities already, and definitely kind of filtering into our universities as well. So we've been speaking to academics. I've been speaking to academics as Code School as part of our Tech Talk series, and the writing's on the wall. Everyone is expected to have some kind of prior school level exposure to coding. But what do you do if there isn't any coding curriculum in your school? And I think there's a very unique gap that our kids are going to get stuck in. And so it's imperative that we get them into coding programs as soon as possible.
So Sadaf, you're saying that even an artist can use coding. How can they use coding?
So, for example, graphic design. So you have tablets and you can make digital art. Or if you are an artist and you want to make a installation, you can 3D print an installation. If you want to do animations, or even if you want to kind of render your image and digital print it, right, rather than actually paint it. Or if you want to see how your art will look like depending on the shade that you use or the material that you use. These are all already out there right now and have been in the market for 10 years. God knows what this field will look like, and I'm not even in this field. So as a layman, I'm saying these are all the tools that are available right now. I don't even know what's going to be available further down the line given how quickly things are progressing. And it's also, I mean, we're using cell phones. Almost everybody has a cell phone or a smartphone or some kind of version of tech. Even if you're using Facebook or Instagram, you're interacting with tech, right? Like it's you can't avoid it. It's in every field, in every kind of gadget that we use, and more things have become gadgetized, right? So I think there's no place left to hide. Tech and coding is going to touch us all.
Hmm. So a lay person who uses smartphone, if they know coding, how can it help them?
That's a great question. So I'll give you an example which will seem funny now, right? Because this was from 15 years ago. When my friends and I had started, we just graduated and we all entered the workplace. And a friend of mine was a teacher in one of the leading schools in Karachi. And she kind of told us one day, and we all had a good laugh about it. And I still remember that anecdote even now, 15 years later, on how they had to total up students' grades at the end of an exam. And the assistant had opened up Excel, because you had Excel at that time as well, and they put in the students' grades, right? And then instead of taking an average, which Excel would allow you to do in 1 second, uh, she printed out that student grade, right? And with a calculator, she summed up all of the students, like there were like 300 students, summed them up, and then she took out an average using a calculator. Because I mean, and this is exactly the analogy that we can apply even today, that something that can take you 2 seconds, if you know how to use Excel or if you know how to use technology properly,
Okay.
you can very easily break it and use it in a completely more erroneous manual way, if you don't know how to use it or if you don't know what the potential for its use is. And so if you it's it can only benefit, it can only help you utilize the resources around you in a better, more meaningful way. And why not?
Mm. And sort of like a lot of people are shifting on e-commerce. So online stores are like pretty much an emerging market in Pakistan, but in the world is operating on e-commerce at the moment. So you feel that entrepreneurs who have no background of tech or programming and these things, if they were to learn coding at an early age, so when they go into e-commerce, it would help them too. That's what you're saying, because they would know how to break it down, and it can speed, and they will better know the technology that they're using and all that's going behind it.
Absolutely. And Khatija, e-commerce is right now.
Uh-huh.
I think we don't even know what's going to happen in the next 10 years. There
Absolutely.
is, I mean, things like social media manager, or even things like social media, I mean, barely existed. I mean, I don't even think they existed when I graduated or when I was in school, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Same.
like, in fact, there's a World Economic Forum study that says that, I think some huge number, I think it's 65% of jobs that children in school today have not been invented as yet. And so 65% of the jobs that are going to exist when our children graduate don't exist. And that's the 21st century skills problem. How can a school teach a child for something that has not been invented as yet? And that conundrum, at the heart of it, is you can't. You don't know what skill is going to be needed. There's some fundamentals that everyone knows. And those fundamentals are computational thinking, creativity, problem solving. Those are things that we know for sure are going to be needed. And so we need to find the best possible way to teach those things. And so 21st century skills, in our opinion at Code School, are best taught through coding. But there are many different paths to that, obviously.
So we have a question here uh, that I think Seema was asking. Whatever the work we do digitally, coding is going to help to make it secure. She's asking if that's true or not.
That's a great question. Absolutely. There is a whole element of cybersecurity. There is a whole kind of stream of privacy, data security. There is a whole kind of element of what we call social engineering. So, what's funny is that if someone has to hack into your, God
I
forbid,
was
I
just
don't
going
know,
to
bank
ask
account,
that about
or
hacking.
steal your credit card information.
Mhm.
And this is so outside the scope of code school, but it's fun. So just mention it. But please, I'm a layman just like you when it comes to this, right? But the idea really is that there's an element of social engineering where people are actually calling you up, pretending to be, for example, from the bank and asking you for your PIN, right? I mean, that's an element of social engineering where your weakest link is perhaps a human being who is not quite sure whether they doesn't know quite enough about security on whether they should divulge this information or not. It's like those WhatsApp hacked account kind of forwards that you get, right? Or those spam emails with a virus embedded in it that you get. Or I mean, there's scams are plenty and they're as old as time. But obviously, the more aware you are and the more kind of tech savvy you are and the more informed you are, the more protected you would be from any kind of security risks.
So let me see. There's another question. Uh, I don't have the name because I don't think the user is registered on Stream yet. So I'll just read it aloud. I'm a mother of 9.8 young. Kindly, basically, she's asking, how would you suggest her to increase the children's computational skill? Afreen Asif. Increase her children's computational skills and teach them coding problem solving. So they should, I think, enroll in the code school curriculum, I think.
You said that, Khadija. I didn't. Afreen, that's a wonderful question, and 100%. I'm so glad that you're thinking about the future of your children, and there are many resources available to you. You can do a Google search, and if you have a himmat jisko kehte hain, to teach your own children, you can do it through YouTube tutorials as well. The easiest and the most basic, which is completely free, is called Scratch. It's been developed by the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the US, by MIT Media Lab. And so it takes away all that difficult aspect of coding. Children as young as 5 years old can do it. It's like block coding, where you just snap together Lego, just say blocks hote hain, you snap together Lego like blocks of code, and they run together, and then there's an output on the screen. And so if you can manage it on your own, wonderful. If you can't, then like Khatija said, we at Code School would be happy to help you. But there is a cost element to it. So you can be, it depends on your budget, and it depends on your child and what's best for you and your family.
So thank you, Sadaf. We won't keep you longer now, but it was an absolute pleasure to have you here and enlighten us about coding. Because honestly, I'm totally a novice when it comes to coding. I didn't know much at all. I just learnt it in the past 30 minutes, and I'm sure the other members of Fempreneur have learnt a lot from you today as well. So thank you, Sadaf.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, Khadija. This was so fantastic and such great questions. So, big thank you to the audience as well.
Yes, and please do share your links and your social media handles under the post as well, so more people can contact you if they want to enroll their children in code school. And I'll wait till my daughter is 6 years old.
Fantastic. And I can just give the website here as well. I'll definitely add in the links, but it's
Yes,
www.codeschool.pk. That's literally our name as well. So it's really easy.
yes, it is. Okay, thank you, Sada.
Take
Have a
care. Allah
wonderful
Hafiz.
weekend. Love is.
Bye.
Love is, everyone. Thank you for joining us.